Cheers, mate.
Cheers, Steve.
Welcome to the first episode of A Beer with Starlo, and this is going to become a regular part of Fishertopia. Hopefully I'll be doing one every month. I'm lucky enough this month to be joined by a good mate of mine, Glen Stewart, better known to many people simply as Stewie. And I've known Stewie for many, many years, and like me, he's gone a little bit mad on his Murray cod fishing in recent years. It sort of gets under your skin, doesn't it?
It does, Steve. It's very, very addictive, and hard to put into words, actually.
You've just had back-to-back wins 2 years in a row in the Invitational Topwater event up at Copeton, which is a pretty hard-fought event. So you come from a high there, and we've just fished the Cod Nationals here at Lake Mulwala, and we started off all right, got some fish on the first day, and then it just went downhill from there. It's a tough game, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Steve. The wheels definitely fell off on day two, and didn't really get much better on day three. So but that's cod fishing. Some days are diamonds, and some days are not.
Yeah. What do you think it is about Murray cod that fascinates it so much?
Oh, I think it's their size. I mean, they're just so much bigger than anything else in fresh water that we've got swimming around. I mean, obviously barra get pretty big, but when you just look at the bulk, when you get one on board, it's just they're just next level.
Yeah, it's pretty special stuff, isn't it? I think you and I are quite lucky too in that we're living in an era, I like to call it a cod fishing renaissance. So I reckon the cod fishing's probably better now than at any time in living memory. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure. I mean, stocked impoundments, fisheries across the country, Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, probably to a lesser extent. I mean, they're just taken off. And
it's probably only going to get better, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. There's, you look at fisheries like Copeton, Burrinjuck, Blowering, Eildon, Mulwala. I mean, Mulwala's been brilliant for a long time, but you can fish from anywhere. Starting at Eildon and work your way all the way up to Glen Lyon. I mean, they're all great fisheries and they've all got potential. Everybody talks about Copeton, but I can tell you right now, Copeton's not alone. No,
there's plenty of other big fish out there, isn't there? Copeton's really stolen the limelight in the last few years, and I love the place, and I know you love it, and it has produced a lot of big fish. But I think guys like Chris Cleaver proved that if you take what you've learned at somewhere like Copeton and go and apply it at some of the other major dams, and even at some of the second level dams that aren't really thought about as being huge cod waters, you can catch them.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Chris's record speaks for itself. I mean, the guy's just he's switched on.
He's a freak.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter what species, marlin or out off the coast or wherever. He just seems to be able to apply himself. And I think that's one of the keys with cod fishing, is especially for big cod, is applying yourself.
Right.
I've got a bit of a mantra that if I pick my partners carefully when I fish for big cod, because they're just a distraction. Somebody that's not into it is just a distraction, and they're going to be in your ear. They're going to be saying, "Oh, let's go and chase some redfin, or let's go and catch some golden perch," and you're just taken away from that time that you want on those big fish.
And they are a specialist's fish, aren't they? I mean, you can go out and target cod and be happy enough to catch 50, 60, 70 centimetre fish, and then every now and again an 85 comes along, and once a year you might get a 90. But if you're going to consistently target those metre plus fish, you're probably going to have to give up a lot of that smaller fish, aren't you?
100%, Steve. It's total 100% dedication, because they are different fish. I mean, I'm not, by all means, I'm not an expert on this. I've really only been targeting big cod for probably the last 2 or 3 seasons. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. I mean, I'm fairly out there on social media, but there is a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes with guys that aren't on social media, and it's they're doing some absolutely awesome things. And I think the scary thing is that there's so much more that there is to discover.
You reckon we're only really scratching the surface?
We are only scratching the surface. In my opinion, we're only scratching the surface.
All right. So what are the keys? What are the key differences between a metre 20 cod and an 80 centimetre cod in their behaviour and the way to go about catching them?
Yeah, that's a hard question, Steve, because I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions. Just from my perspective, things I've changed. Obviously, bigger baits is a big thing, and with that goes the specialty tackle, the big swim bait rods, the heavier line, the heavier leader. Times of day, those low light periods are key. That change of light, whether it's first thing in the morning or last thing in the afternoon into the evening, they definitely seem to be key factors just from what I've seen.
Yeah. And time of year, 20 years ago when I thought about chasing Murray cod on surface lures, you'd go out on the hottest evening you could find with the cicadas screaming and throw surface lures and catch little cod in the rivers, and it was great fun. But we're going out and throwing these huge surface lures in the depths of winter on the coldest mornings imaginable up at Coaching. Absolutely ice on the deck. When you and I filmed an episode of A Fisherman's Life up there, and we're skating around on the deck because there's a layer of ice on it.
You had to put a towel.
I did, or I was going to end up in the drink.
Ass up.
What's that all about? Why are they so catchable in the winter months, the big cod?
Well, I think, and I mean, I'm not a scientist, obviously, but I think there's not genetically, but they've evolved. They're set up for it. They're a big fish, big body, high fat content.
Yep.
In comparison to the fish that they're eating, they're swimming around with, they're just so much bigger. So I think they retain that heat, and that puts them at a bigger advantage or a better advantage at the coldest time of year. So when everything else is struggling, they're at their best. And
not just the coldest time of year, but the coldest time of the day at the coldest time of year. So when that mercury hits its absolute minimum at between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning at Copeland, that seems to be the key time.
That's it. And I think it's also, if something's sick, dead or dying, that coldest time is when it's at its weakest.
Yep.
So you've got, I don't know, maybe a 3 or 4 pound carp that's had a tough day the day before. When's it going to go belly up, or when's it going to be struggling the most? It's going to be at that coldest time.
And even a fairly healthy bony brim or a spangle perch or something like that is probably going to be a bit slow and lethargic when the surface water's really cold and the air temperature's at its lowest, and that's when the cod can pin him against the surface and smack him.
Yeah, that's it.
He's a big fish. He's a big fish. I wish I hadn't looked down.
The other thing that I've been really impressed by, and it's probably been the biggest wake-up call for me, is how shallow these big cod will hunt. Barely enough water to cover their back. And in fact, Paul Nella and I watched one swim over a shallow ridge between an island and the mainland at Copeton one evening, just in the last glimmer of light, and watched its whole back and dorsal fin come out of the water as it worked its way through shallow water to get into another area.
Yep. Murray and I had a session at Copeton, was not the Top Water Classic just gone, but the one before. A couple of times in the dark, obviously, Murray's lure landed on the bank. He pulled his lure off the bank, grassy bank, pulled it into the water, and wouldn't have gone 1 or 2 cranks of the handle, and caught a 70 centimetre fish. So they're in there. They're in that shallow water.
Barely deep enough to cover them.
Yep.
And that makes sense when you think about it too, because what have they got to fear? What's the natural predator of an 80, 90 centimetre cod, metre long cod? They no longer need to worry about pelicans or sea eagles or anything like that, do they?
No, that's it.
They're quite safe up in that shallow water.
And they are using the bank to push bait fish against as well.
I think that's a really good point. They need something to trap the bait fish against. They're not going to run down a perfectly healthy bony brim or a spangly out in open water, but if they can press it against the surface or up against the bank, they've cut out a couple of dimensions, haven't they, for that fish to get away.
Just one thing on that, I think that you can go into that water too early.
Yeah.
I think you can. At times, I think you're better off sitting off and waiting.
So you think your presence in there can stop them coming
in? Yep, I have had that before. And look, I mean, it's a pretty broad. You're painting a pretty broad brush, but I think a boat in shallow water, you're talking, 6-7 feet. It's you're clanging and banging and carrying on. You're going to scare bait fish out. You're going to scare cod away.
I agree. And no matter how quiet you are, fiberglass boat, on the electric, everyone on board being really, really quiet, there's still a presence of that boat. It's changing. If there's any little waves or ripples on the surface, their directions being changed by the boat being there. Electrics are quiet, but they're not completely silent. I've stuck my head underwater and listened to an electric motor working, and you can hear them. So, and you've got to even wonder about things like the sounder pinging away.
I'm a little bit anal about boat noise, Steve. I actually turn my sounders off. If I know where I'm fishing, I'll turn my sounders off in 20 feet or less. And I'll try, if I can, to get a downwind drift. So I rely, try and keep the electric motor noise to an absolute minimum. I mean, you're talking big predatory fish in shallow water, and I think they're pretty easily spooked.
Yeah, and it flies in the face of stuff that we've all heard from years ago about going up and banging on the trees to wake the cod up and stuff like that. And everyone's got a story of a cod that was caught just after a ski boat went through or whatever. But I think a lot of that might be in busy waterways where they do become, somewhere like Mulwala, I'm sure they become conditioned to boats going past and stuff like that. And they may even use the wash from the boats to knock a yabby off a stump and eat it. But you go to somewhere like Copeton that is really quiet at 4 o'clock in the morning in the middle of July. There aren't too many quieter places than Copeton Dam.
You could hear a bullfrog fart.
Yeah, I've heard one actually. And you're right, you start making a racket in there. I don't like it when there's another boat in the same bay that I'm fishing, even if they're being really quiet. But that's a really good point about not getting in there too early and stopping the fish moving in there. You're probably better off to go and fish some other country, go and fish some snags. Or
it might be a bit different if you're in a big, wide open bay, but if you're in a corridor or a little creek section or something like that, those fish, me, just personally, I don't think they're not in that shallow water all the time. They're using it as a feeding zone, and they're actually out in deeper water, holed up on some timber or structure for most of the day. They're waiting for the light levels to drop, and then as those light levels drop, you can see it. Those bait fish push to the bank because they don't want to be out in that deep water where the cod are. So they push to the bank, cod follow them up. And if you're in that little neck or corridor, you're stopping bait fish from going up in there, you're stopping the cod from going up in there. A little bit different if you're in a big wide open bay.
And the cod's got all the time in the world. If he doesn't like the feel of that bay, if there's something in there, you can leave it till tomorrow night or the night after, or he can swim to the next bay and go into that. So you just really don't want that working against you.
No, that's it.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And all right, the lures, they're getting bigger. We're throwing big stuff now, but I know that you've got a theory that we still haven't got to where we need to be to appeal to the biggest cod.
Yeah, it's a bit scary and a bit out there, but I've said it to a few guys, cod fishers, even this weekend, and I had a few blank looks, but I honestly don't think we're even really fishing for the true giants. And when I say true giants, 1.5 or bigger, I think it's going to be on the cards in the next few years. I mean, what you've got to realise now, 3, even 2 years ago, guys were just going out to catch a cod. Now, guys are going out to catch the biggest cod that lives in that waterway. So they're gearing up. They're getting, bigger lures, better gear, heavier leaders, and they're taking those steps. So everybody's taking those steps. So we've created environments whereby, these fish I think can grow to those levels. We're just not fishing for them yet.
Yep.
So it's pretty scary.
It's scary but exciting.
I mean, what about the story we heard this weekend?
Yeah, that's a classic. Guy that got a follow from about 1.10 metre cod, came to the boat following the lure, and then peeled off and ate the head of the electric motor that was turning over at the time. This is that big with a big propeller on the end of it. It was far more interested in that than the lure that it had just followed up. So there's a story in that. And I remember fishing the New England rivers years ago, and all we ever caught was small cod. The only big cod we'd ever see were when they'd materialise out of the depths and try and eat the 55 or 60 centimetre cod that we had on our line. They weren't interested in the little lures that we were throwing.
That's it. How we go about doing that, that's out there. I mean,
yeah, how do you throw something that big? We're already up to some serious tackle, and it's quite hard work throwing those big lures.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to have to go back to trolling, which is that's fair enough. I don't enjoy trolling as much as I do casting, and I know you're the same. But there may be ways where we can come up with large profile lures that look big but aren't necessarily massively heavy or bulky or whatever.
Actually, you say that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of developments at the moment happening in fly fishing as well, and they've probably grabbed hold of that probably more so than what the lure guys have, because they have to, obviously, delivering something that on fly that needs to be light. But they're really looking into different materials to get that bigger profile. So maybe down the track, I mean, the cottage lure industry in Australia has just gone gangbusters. So
this cod fishery's been great for the tackle industry generally, hasn't it? It kind of came in and filled a niche that was left a little bit empty when the gloss went off the big impoundment barra fishery around 2010, when a lot of the dams went over their walls and a lot of the fish escaped. People that had been travelling to Queensland every year to go and fish at Woonga or Peter Faust or any of the big dams up there were looking for another outlet, and then the big cod came online. They'd always been there, or had been there for quite a long time, but then the same guys using the same sort of tackle started to chase those. So it's been a real shot in the arm for the tackle industry, for caravan parks and local tourism and all that sort of thing. It's really good. But what I try and get across to people who've only seen this on social media and want to go out and have a crack at it, it's not easy, is it? There are a lot easier fisheries around than big cod.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. I mean, look at this weekend for us. I mean, it's a classic example. It's very, very hard yards for most of the time. Yeah,
you really do need to put the time in. And the closest equivalent I can think of is mulloway jewfish in the salt water, and the guys that catch big jewies tend to put the time in. Again, you get the occasional freak like Chris Cleaver who can just about dial them up, but he's done the hard yards. And he's also, Chris will be the first to tell you, he has his blank days too. He still has blank days now, and that's really knowing his fish. And that's going to happen even more with Murray cod. The best anglers out there still can't guarantee they're going to go and get one every time. And as you start to focus at that bigger end of the scale that you're talking about, then your catch rate's got to drop, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, your catch per unit effort definitely takes a nosedive.
Yeah. I mean, this weekend that we've just fished, 3.5 days on the water, 66 anglers. There were 4 fish over a metre caught. I did a quick back of the beer coaster calculation on that, and that's an enormous number of angler days. I think it was 50 odd angler days per metre fish. So if one bloke was to go out there and do it, he'd have to fish for 50 odd days to catch one. It's not always that hard, and the fish were a little bit shut down with some odd weather over the last couple of days. But don't go out there expecting immediate results. You've got to be pretty serious about this, and you've got to put the time in. But the rewards are worth it, aren't they, when you get it?
Oh, for sure.
Well, listen, mate, thanks for sharing a few gems of wisdom with me on A Beer with Starlo. It's been really good to have a yarn, and might get you back in 6 months or a year and see where the cod fishing's gone.
Yeah, no, that'd be good, Steve. I'm sure there's, I mean, the amount of development that's still, I think, out there for everyone to get into. I mean, there's just so many pages of the book that still need to be turned.
Let's write a few. Cheers, mate.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Ty.
Tight lines.